The turtle god tests Chenhu by forcing him to confront the demon of the drowned. But the demon reveals something to him that makes Chenhu unwilling to kill it. What secret could force him to reconsider his desire for revenge against the shape-shifting demon responsible for his parents' deaths? Episode 7. The Common Secret of Gods and Demons. The portal closed behind them without a sound. It simply collapsed, the way eyelids meet in the moment between waking and sleep, and the world beyond it vanished so completely it might never have existed. Chenhu stood still, giving his eyes time to adjust. Not to darkness. There was no darkness here. To light. To that particular diffuse, almost milky light that has no source and casts no shadows. Light that seems to emanate from the air itself, from the damp earth underfoot, from every leaf, from the surface of every stream. Water was everywhere. Not spilled, not flooding. It lived here differently. In thin threads stitching through moss between roots, in wide mirrors reflecting a sky invisible through the canopy, in small waterfalls no taller than a forearm, flowing over mossy stones without thunder, almost without sound. Like tears down an old face that has long since stopped trying to hold them back. The trees here were enormous in the way that only things are enormous which have never been told they could be smaller. Their roots plunged into the earth and simultaneously rose above it, forming arches tall enough to walk beneath without bowing. Vines hung from everywhere, pensively, like the hands of one who has long forgotten how to hurry. On every stone, every branch, in every gap between water and land, something lived. Butterflies with wings the color of sunset, painted as though by someone working blind in the dark who somehow guessed right. Herons standing in the shallows with such dignity it felt impolite to look at them directly. Tortoises with shells patterned like the script of a language no one remembers, basking on stones, paying the newcomers no attention whatsoever. This was a place that had no need of people. It had existed before them and, by all appearances, had no intention of sharing their fate. The tiger walked first. He walked the way creatures walk that sense danger everywhere and are everywhere prepared for it. Not with tension, but with that particular attention spent not on the beauty around him, but on what that beauty concealed. His nostrils flared slightly. His gaze moved methodically, not anxiously, but like a hunter who has come not for prey, but to survey the ground before a battle. Chenhu noticed this before he had time to think about it. And Sifu, of course, had already opened his mouth. "Listen," he began, glancing around with the air of someone who is impressed but has no intention of showing it. "I've been thinking. The turtle has so many domains. Water, fine, that makes sense. But all living things, and death, and the balance of souls. What does water have to do with some cosmic karmic order of things?" "Water fills everything," said the tiger without turning, "but always takes the shape of whatever contains it. That is balance." Sifu pursed his lips with the expression of a man who has received an answer and found it insufficient. I thought it was simpler than that. All people came from water after all. We lived in the sea first, small, with tails swimming around. Then grew legs, climbed onto land. Evolution, one thing after another. And here we are. Water is the beginning of everything. The silence that followed was more eloquent than any rebuttal. Mo walked slightly to the side, wearing the expression of a man who has just heard something so blasphemous he cannot decide where to begin. "Stop," he said at last, with the calm that conceals poorly restrained irritation. "You're saying this in the very halls. Have at least a little respect." "For whom?" Sifu turned to him without the slightest trace of remorse. "For gods who've nearly killed us several times in the past few weeks? You're a blasphemer. And you're naive." Sifu said it without malice, almost fondly, the way one speaks of a flaw one finds more endearing than troubling. "Mo, they're all powerful, yes. The lion, the fox, the phoenix, all the rest. But none of them created people. Do you understand? There's something greater, some force that gave birth to all of this long before the gods existed. The gods are just caretakers, instruments of control. They fix problems in the system when something goes wrong. You make things up, said Mo. Tell me I'm wrong. Sifu turned to the tiger, with the look of a man appealing to an arbiter already certain of his support. Tiger! Tiger! But the god of war was not listening. He walked slightly ahead, and his entire being was turned not toward the conversation, but toward something else. Toward the space around them, toward the smells of the forest, toward a silence in which he apparently heard things the others could not. He was tracking something, or listening for something, or simply knew something he did not yet consider it necessary to share. Sifu watched his back for a few moments, then slowly turned to Chenhu and leaned closer, dropping his voice to a whisper. You see that? He said, with the tone of a man unpleasantly satisfied by his own premonition. He's sniffing out an ambush. The god of war, killing, and retribution comes to the halls of the god of balance, life, and death. They must hate each other. It's natural, like fire and water. And here we are following right behind him, without weapons, without the sword you've already melted down, trusting that they have some kind of neighborly relationship. He paused. Don't you think the tiger's presence will only make things worse? Seriously, he's the god of war. Do you think they get along? The god of war and the god of life? Chenhu walked on without changing his pace. The turtle is also the god of death, he said. Everything is a cycle. Sifu turned this over for several seconds. A cycle is about what's natural, he replied at last. Birth, life, death. Yes, that's a cycle. But what does war have to do with it? War isn't part of the cycle. It's more like a short circuit in it. They're more likely sworn enemies than brothers in the pantheon. He glanced at the tiger, satisfied himself that he was still absorbed in his reconnaissance, and added more quietly. And you melted the sword for nothing, by the way. How exactly are we supposed to fight our way out if this all goes wrong? Chenhu did not answer. He was looking ahead, toward where the trees began to thin and a different light pressed through between the trunks, wider and more open. And he was thinking not about what would happen if things went wrong. He was thinking about what he had already come to understand about gods in these past days. Each of them conceals something. Each pursues their own purpose, and the help they offer always costs more than it appears to in the moment of receiving it. The phoenix had warned him. Whoever guides you down this path is leading you to ruin. The wind dragon had deliberately made the bag one use only. The tiger had said nothing about the typhoon dragon's brother, had stayed silent until it was too late to turn back. And now, this same tiger, sniffing out ambushes in the sanctuary of the god of life, had volunteered to help negotiate with the turtle. Unusual for a god of war. Mo had noticed it back at the gorilla's forge. Chenhu had seen it in his eyes. The words had never been spoken aloud, but the thought already existed between them, silent and sharp as a blade still sheathed. Keep quiet, said the tiger, not loudly, but in a way that silenced both voices behind him at once. And stay alert. The forest opened. They stepped into a clearing and stopped. An enormous lake lay before them, still to the point of disbelief, its surface so smooth that the sky reflected in it seemed more real than the one above their heads. In the middle, a small island, and on it a tree. Simple in appearance, without fire, without radiance, without the marks of greatness that might be expected of anything bearing the name of the eternal. Just a tree. But above it stood a rainbow. Not after rain, not from mist, standing the way things stand that were here before everything else and have no intention of going anywhere. The portal closed behind them without a sound. It simply collapsed, the way eyelids close in the moment between waking and sleep, and the world behind it vanished so completely as though it had never existed. Chenhu stood motionless, giving his eyes time to adjust. not to darkness. There was no darkness here. To light. To that particular diffuse, almost milky light that has no source and casts no shadows. Light that seems to emanate from the air itself, from the damp earth underfoot, from every leaf, from the surface of every stream. Water was everywhere. Not spilled, not flooding. It lived here differently. In thin threads stitching through moss between roots, in wide mirrors reflecting a sky invisible through the canopy, in small waterfalls no taller than a forearm, flowing over mossy stones without thunder, nearly without sound, like tears down an old face that has long since stopped trying to hold them back. The trees here were enormous, the way only things are enormous that have never known they could be smaller. Their roots sank into the earth and simultaneously rose above it, forming arches tall enough to walk beneath without bowing. Vines hung everywhere, pensively, like the hands of one who has long since forgotten how to hurry. On every stone, every branch, in every gap between water and land, something lived. Butterflies with wings the color of sunset, painted as though by someone working blind in the dark who happened to get it right. Herons standing in the shallow channels with such dignity it felt impolite to look at them directly. Turtles with shells etched in patterns resembling the script of a language no one remembers. They basked on the stones and paid the newcomers no attention whatsoever. This was a place that had no need of people. It had existed before them and, by all appearances, had no intention of sharing their fate. Tiger walked first. He walked the way creatures walk that sense danger everywhere and are everywhere prepared for it. Not tensely, but with that particular attention spent not on the beauty around him, but on what that beauty might be concealing. His nostrils flared slightly. His gaze moved methodically. Not anxiously, but like a hunter who has come not for prey but to read the ground before a fight. Chenhu noticed this before he had time to think about it, and Sifu, naturally, had already opened his mouth. "Listen," he began, glancing around with the air of someone who is impressed but has no intention of showing it. "I've been thinking. The turtle has so many domains. Water, fine, but also all living things, and death, and the balance of souls. What does water have to do with some kind of cosmic karmic order of things?" "Water fills everything," said Tiger, not turning around, "but always takes the shape of whatever contains it. That is balance." Sifu pressed his lips together with the expression of a man who has received an answer and found it insufficient. I thought it was simpler than that. All people came from water, after all. We lived in the sea first, small, with tails, swimming around. Then we grew legs, climbed ashore. Evolution, one thing after another. And here we are. Water is the origin of everything. The silence that followed was more eloquent than any objection. Mo walked slightly to the side, wearing the expression of a man who has just heard something so blasphemous he cannot decide where to begin. "Stop," he said at last, with the calm that conceals poorly restrained irritation. "You are saying this in the very halls of a god. Have at least some respect." "For whom?" Sifu turned to him without the faintest sign of remorse. "For gods who have nearly killed us several times in the past few weeks? You are a blasphemer. And you are naive." Sifu said it without cruelty, almost fondly, the way one speaks of a flaw one finds more endearing than troubling. "Mo, they are all powerful, yes. The lion, the fox, the phoenix, all the others. But none of them created people. Do you understand? There is something greater. Some force that set all of this in motion long before the gods existed. And the gods, they are like caretakers, instruments of control. They manage the faults in the system when something goes wrong." "You make things up," said Mo. "Tell me I am wrong." Sifu turned to Tiger with the look of a man appealing to an arbiter whose support he has already counted on. Tiger! Tiger! But the god of war was not listening. He walked slightly ahead, and everything about him was turned not toward the conversation, but toward something else. Toward the space around them, toward the smells of the forest, toward the silence in which he was, apparently, hearing things the others could not. He was scenting something, or listening for it, or simply already knew something he did not yet consider worth sharing. Sifu watched his back for a few moments, then slowly turned his gaze to Chenhu and leaned closer, dropping his voice to a whisper. "You see that?" he said, with the tone of a man unpleasantly pleased by his own foresight. "He is sniffing out an ambush." The god of war, of killing and retribution, walks into the halls of the god of balance, life and death. They must hate each other. It is only natural, like fire and water. And here we are walking behind him, without a weapon, without the sword you already melted down, trusting that they have some kind of neighborly arrangement between them. He paused. Don't you think Tiger's very presence will only make everything worse? Seriously, this is the god of war. Do you think they get along? The god of war and the god of life? Chenhu walked on without changing pace. The turtle is also the god of death, he said. Everything is a cycle. Sifu absorbed this for a few seconds. A cycle is something natural, he replied at last. Birth, life, death. Yes, that is a cycle. But where does war fit into it? War is not part of the cycle. It is more like a short circuit within it. They are more likely sworn enemies than companions in the pantheon. He glanced at Tiger, satisfied himself that the god was still occupied with his reconnaissance, and added more quietly, "And you melted down the sword for nothing, by the way. How exactly are we supposed to fight our way out if this all goes wrong?" Chenhu did not answer. He looked ahead, toward where the trees were beginning to thin and a different light pressed through between the trunks, wider and more open. And he was thinking not about what would happen if things went wrong. He was thinking about what he had already come to understand about gods over these past days. Each of them conceals something. Each pursues their own purpose, and the help they offer always costs more than it appears to in the moment of receiving it. The phoenix had warned him. The one who guides you down this path is guiding you toward ruin. The wind dragon had deliberately made the bag single-use. Tiger had said nothing about the typhoon dragon's brother until it was too late to turn back. And now this same tiger, scenting ambushes in the sanctuary of the god of life, had volunteered to help negotiate with the turtle himself. Unusual for a god of war. Mo had noticed it back at the gorilla's forge. Chenhu had seen it in his eyes. Nothing had been said aloud, but the thought already existed between them, silent and sharp as a knife still in its sheath. "Keep quiet," said Tiger, not loudly, but in a way that silenced both voices behind him immediately. "And stay alert." The forest opened. They stepped out onto a clearing, and stopped. An enormous lake lay before them, calm to the point of impossibility, its surface so smooth that the sky reflected in it seemed more real than the one above their heads. In the center, a small island, and on it, a tree. Simple in appearance, without fire, without radiance, without the marks of greatness that might be expected of anything bearing the name of the eternal. Just a tree. But above it stood a rainbow, not after rain, not from spray. It simply stood, the way things stand, that were here before everything else and have no intention of leaving. The temple inside the turtle's halls was strange, not because it looked out of place among the forest and water, but because, on the contrary, it seemed part of them as naturally as a root is part of a tree. The stone walls were overgrown with moss, not from neglect but from time, from that particular ancientness at which things stop decaying and simply grow older. There was no ceiling. Instead, the crowns of trees closed above into a living vault, through which filtered the same diffuse milky light, sourceless and shadowless. The turtle occupied a throne, not pompous, not gilded, but hewn from a single stone, dark and damp, as though raised from the lake bed. Tiger had been given a throne to the side, slightly lower, slightly apart, and in that difference of height was something that spoke of an arrangement the host and guest had long since reached and no longer discussed. Chenhu, Mo, and Sifu received 3 stone stools, heavy, backless, unadorned, stools for people in a hall of gods. Chenhu sat straight. Mo sat with equal straightness but greater dignity. Sifu shifted, trying to find comfort, caught Mo's eye, and stopped. The turtle looked at them with both eyes, the soft, dark one and the calm, very old one. He spoke through one mouth but in 2 voices simultaneously, female and male, woven together so tightly that growing used to it was impossible. One could only stop resisting and accept it as given, the way one accepts the sound of 2 rivers merging into one. The silence lasted exactly as long as it takes to understand that no one here is in any hurry. Then Sifu broke. He always broke. "Forgive the directness," he began, with the particular tone of a man who asks forgiveness in advance without planning to change anything. "But I've been thinking about one thing the whole way here. The god of life and the god of war. Friends. That's..." He turned his hand in the air, searching for the word. "Unnatural. Like a fox and a hare. Forgive the analogy." Tiger did not react. He sat on his throne slightly to the side, calm, wearing the expression of someone listening to a story they know by heart but have not tired of hearing. The turtle was silent. Then both voices spoke at once. "I won't lie." All 3 leaned forward slightly, in unison, without noticing. "In the very beginning," the turtle continued, "when the world was still young and the gods were only settling into its boundaries, Tiger and I did not get along. Not at all." A pause. The soft eye looked at Tiger. The old eye looked at the 3 people. "I considered him the embodiment of what should not exist, a phenomenon that had no right to be, and I wanted to kill him." Sifu opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Mo stared straight ahead with the expression of a man whose footing has just been pulled from beneath him. Footing he had considered unshakable. Chenhu's face did not change, but something in him grew slightly more attentive, slightly quieter. Tiger smiled, not triumphantly, wisely, the way an old friend smiles listening to the story of his own youth told by someone else. "I very nearly killed the god of war," the turtle repeated, as though he himself still found something worth contemplating in it. "And that tells you something important. People have grown accustomed to thinking of gods as beings of absolute wisdom, of perfect knowledge, that we arrived already complete, already understanding, already in the right." Both voices dropped slightly, grew a little quieter. "But that is not so. Gods are mistaken. Gods err. I was wrong about Tiger the way a man is wrong about the sea when he has never stood at its shore. And just as a man can, gods are capable of gaining understanding, if they choose to." "But," Mo spoke slowly, with the careful effort of someone stepping over something fragile, "I always imagined gods as a kind of dogma, something constant, perfect, unchanging, eternal. And you are saying that gods are like people?" Something resembling warmth entered the turtle's double voice. "The only constant in this world is its impermanence," he said, "and perfection lives within imperfection." He looked at each of the 3 in turn, with the expression of one who watches those beginning a road they themselves walked long ago. "I can see from your faces that this thought still feels foreign to you. That is fine. It always does, until life makes it your own. Take me as an example. I am the god of water, the god of all living things, but I am also the god of death." A pause, deliberate, giving the words time to settle. Everything in this world is connected. And I understood. Being the god of life, I must also be the god of death. Though they are opposing categories, they do not exclude each other. They sustain each other. The meaning is in balance, always only in that. Sifu listened with the concentrated attention he usually took great care to hide behind conversation. "And that is how you became friends with Tiger?" he asked. "Through that same idea?" "Through it," the turtle confirmed. "For a long time I considered him an unnatural phenomenon, a force with no place in an ordered world. But then I understood. Nothing appears in the universe without reason. Not one thing, not one being, not one force, without cause, without place, without a purpose that, perhaps, I am not fully given to comprehend. And Tiger, too, is part of the design. The other side. The balance." Both voices slowed slightly, grew weightier. War is not an ornament of the world, but it is part of it. Sometimes war is a remedy. When a leg is rotting and the gangrene spreads, it is cut away so the man survives. That is brutal. That is painful. But it is the only path. Or when townspeople rise against a despot who has turned their lives into years of slow dying and bring him down. That too is war. And that too is part of the design. War is a force that humanity needs. "Needs," said Tiger, the first time he had spoken throughout. He spoke quietly, with that particular weight in the voice that belongs to those unaccustomed to speaking much, but capable of speaking precisely. But less so now. "Look at the world, brother. Wars have grown fewer. People have learned to negotiate. My hour may be shorter than it once was." The turtle looked at him, long, with that mixture of tenderness and disagreement that exists only between those who know each other well enough to stop pretending. "Wars have grown fewer," he repeated, and both voices sounded together, quiet and without triumph. "But killings, my friend, have not decreased because of it." Tiger did not answer. He looked somewhere to the side, into the space between the temple walls and the tree crowns above, where there was nothing particular, only sourceless light and air that smelled of water and old stone. His face wore an expression Chenhu had seen once before, not on Tiger's face, but on the face of his old master in the mountains, when the master looked at a sunset and was silent in a way that made the silence itself feel like an answer to a question no one had spoken aloud. Chenhu sat straight and looked at the turtle. He thought about how a god who had once wanted to kill the god of war and had changed his mind was not the god he had expected to find here. He thought about how the phoenix had warned him, how the wind dragon had spoken plainly of his own self-interest, how every god he had encountered had turned out to be not what they appeared from a distance, more complex, more contradictory, and for that reason, strangely, more dangerous. Not because they were crueler, but because they were less predictable. Because each of them possessed a wisdom they considered the only true one, and a price they considered fair. And now he sat before the god of balance, of cause and effect, of life and death, and waited to learn what that price would be. The turtle spoke, and his two voices, female and male, flowed together like two currents of one river, never fully merging but never separating. In that double sound, there was something impossible to stop attending to. Every word arrived twice, first as a statement, then as its shadow. "The world is changing," he said, "and not in the direction it should. More and more souls are enslaved by greed, by chaos, by fear that people themselves breed and feed on and pass forward like a sickness." Both voices grew quieter but weightier, the way still water is deeper than noisy water. "We gods must accept this fight, against the darkest corners of human nature, against the demons that live not only outside, but within." Chenhu listened, and at a certain point something in him could not hold, not anger, not impatience, but that sharper feeling that comes when words are right, but something in them does not add up. "Then why does the lion forbid killing demons?" he asked, directly, without softening, as he knew how. "If they must be fought, why the prohibition?" The turtle looked at him for a long time. The soft eye and the old eye both looked with the same expression, in which there was no judgment but something resembling the weariness of one who has heard questions asked by people who do not suspect they have already answered them themselves. "The lion's prohibition," said the turtle at last, "did not stop you." A pause. "Moreover, you killed a god." Tiger did not move. He sat on his throne slightly to the side and looked into the middle distance with the air of a man who understands. Here it is better to be silent. To argue with the turtle on his territory, in his temple, on his terms, was like arguing with a river about the direction of its current. "Chenhu," the turtle continued, and in his double voice something appeared that had not been there before. Not severity, but that particular gravity with which one speaks of things that must be said aloud, even knowing they will not be welcomed. "When you killed the god of typhoons, the balance of the universe shifted. This is not a metaphor. This is not an exaggeration. This is literally what happened." He paused, the way one pauses before explaining something complex to those who do not yet have the words for it. Take a tree. Cut down one tree. Nothing much happens. The forest does not notice. Cut down a forest, and the animals that lived beneath its canopy lose their shelter. The grass the forest protected from direct sun burns away. An ecosystem built over hundreds of years collapses. Now imagine, cut down all the trees, every one, everywhere, to the last. Both voices grew very quiet. Part of the world dies, not figuratively, literally dies. And what remains will be a different world. A worse one. Sifu was not breathing. Mo stared straight ahead with the expression of a man who does not want to think about what he is thinking. "Gods are part of this world," the turtle continued, "with their tasks, their responsibilities, their place in the order of things that holds everything else together. And a god is not one tree, not even a forest. A god is all the trees of all the worlds you have never seen and never will. And when a god is killed, the world changes. Its nature changes. The balance is disturbed in ways even those who disturbed it cannot predict. That is why gods must not be killed. Not because the lion said so, because this truth is older than the lion." Chenhu did not look away. He watched the turtle, listening, understanding, and somewhere inside, in that place which does not obey words, something very slowly, very quietly began to shift. But on the surface, nothing. On the surface, only his gaze, straight and steady. "And now," said the turtle, "the lion will seek to restore the balance. How exactly? I do not know. That is not my domain. But one thing I know with certainty. He will follow your trail, Chenhu, and he will not stop." Then the turtle turned to Tiger, and in his double voice appeared something absent from the conversation with the humans, something more personal, more direct, as it is between those who have known each other too long to soften words. "And you, brother, will not escape lightly. When the lion learns that you are helping this mortal, and he will learn, you will have to answer for it." Tiger finally spoke, quietly, without defense, without justification, simply as a man naming things by their names. "You understand that I cannot abandon a warrior who went against the sun." He tilted his head slightly. "This is my nature, to favor those who fight. I am the god of war. I do not choose this. I am this." The turtle looked at him for a long time, then nodded, Not in agreement, but in acknowledgement. Yes, I knew that. Yes, that is precisely why I am saying it. War I can still accept, he said. War is a force. We have already spoken of this. But what you are helping, that is not war. Both voices wove tighter together, as though what followed required greater firmness. Vengeance is destruction. It kills not only the one it is directed at, it kills the one who carries it. From within, slowly, invisibly, the way water wears through stone, not by force, but by time. Many things happen in the world: death, injustice, loss. But vengeance is not the answer to them. It is the choice to destroy oneself alongside the enemy and call it victory. His voice did not harden, but it became final. Vengeance is foreign to me. It is unnatural at its very core, and therefore I cannot help you. Whatever you might ask, I am the God of life and death. I uphold the laws of cause and effect, and I cannot indulge a path on which not only demons perish, but gods. A pause. Long. Then, forgive me, brother. You will leave with nothing. Chenhu felt something tighten inside him. Not from fear, not from confusion, but from that recognizable sensation that comes when a wall appears where you did not expect one. He opened his mouth. Cause and effect, he said quietly, and in his voice there was not anger, but something colder and sharper. My vengeance is the most direct consequence there is. The shapeshifter killed my father, killed my mother. That is the cause. He will pay for it. That is the effect. Where in that is your law violated? The turtle looked at him with the expression of one who has heard this exact argument before, and each time thinks the same thing. How to explain to a person what they will only understand when it is already too late? You were not listening, he said simply. I told you everything that needed to be heard. You heard, but you were not listening. Both voices followed, like an echo. Forgive me. And then Mo spoke. Not immediately. First, there was silence. That particular silence of Mo's, which always meant not the absence of thought, but its movement. He looked at the turtle, looked at Chenhu, looked at his own hands resting on his knees, and then he raised his eyes. Wait, he said. Everyone turned. Mo spoke rarely, and precisely because of this, when he did, people listened. You are the god of balance, of cause and effect. He addressed the turtle calmly, without deference, without any attempt at flattery, simply as a man setting out what he thinks. Then you certainly understand what an exchange is, when one gives and receives something in return. That is also balance. That is also cause and effect. He paused. Chenhu wants vengeance. You cannot help with that. Very well. But what if this is not about helping with vengeance, but about a mutually beneficial arrangement? What if you have something we need, and we have something you need? Silence. Tiger nodded slowly, barely perceptibly, but Chenhu saw it. Sifu opened his mouth slightly, then closed it, then muttered almost soundlessly under his breath. Not for nothing do we feed him. Chenhu did not take his eyes off the turtle. He watched how a god thinks. It was visible, it was almost physically palpable, the way air pressure changes before a storm. The turtle was silent for a long time. Then both voices spoke simultaneously, and in them was something resembling the surprise that a very ancient being experiences very rarely. Truly, the perfection of the world lies in its imperfection. A pause. And a god may find wisdom where he did not expect to. He looked at Mo with the expression of one regarding an unexpected gift. Very well. If you are prepared to give me something in return, I am prepared to receive it." Both voices leveled out, grew more businesslike, drier. "I have a task no one has been able to carry out. There is a small lake, a small god of that lake, weak, almost forgotten. The faith of the people in him has faded. The water has ceased to flow as it should, and the lake has become a swamp. And in the swamp, as tends to happen, a demon has taken up residence." He paused. To fill the swamp with earth would mean giving that land to the god of the deer, the god of earth. I do not intend to allow that. That is my water, my domain, and to yield it to the deer would be a weakness I will not permit myself. I had intended to ask the new chosen warrior to deal with this, but there is no chosen warrior. The gaze, soft and old, settled on Chenhu. Yet here you are, and the fact that you came here yourself, without invitation, without status, I do not see that as coincidence. Restore the lake, return the god to his place, and I will give you what you need. Chenhu did not hesitate. "The primordial element of water," he said. "Precisely," answered the turtle. Tiger was already rising, already reaching with his claws toward the air, toward the place where a portal usually opened. But the turtle stopped him with one word. "No." Tiger went still. "The people I will send myself," said the turtle evenly. "And you, brother, will stay." Both voices drew closer together, grew quieter, almost intimate. "We need to talk, alone." Something passed between them, quickly, invisibly, like a current through water. Tiger lowered his hand, sat back. On his face there was neither protest nor agreement, only that closed, impenetrable expression behind which he concealed everything he had no intention of showing. Chenhu looked at him, for a second, two, then looked away. Sifu was already standing at the portal, with the air of a man who wanted to say something pointed but understood the moment was not right. Mo stood beside him, straight, calm, wearing the expression that appeared on his face each time he had made a decision and no longer spent effort on doubt. They entered the portal, one after another. The pale blue light closed behind them. Two remained in the temple, the god of war and the god of balance. Tiger looked at the water of the well, in which there was no longer any portal, only water, dark and still, and said nothing. The turtle did not hurry him. The portal released them into the world without warning. The pale blue light simply collapsed, and instead of it there was a road. Dusty, dry, with cracked earth along the verges where the grass had long since given up and yellowed to the color of old straw. The sky above was white, not from clouds, but from that particular heat in which the sun loses its outline and dissolves into its own glare, turning the entire sky into one continuous scorched surface. Chenhu stood and looked ahead. Somewhere beyond the bend in the road, rooftops were visible, dark, sunken, covered in the same whitish haze as everything around them. "Beautiful," said Sifu. His voice was entirely without irony, which in itself said a great deal. They walked. The village met them with silence before they had even reached it. Not the silence that comes at midday when people shelter from the heat and life simply quiets, but a different silence, dense and watchful, in which one felt the presence of people who had deliberately stopped making sound. The kitchen gardens along the road were empty, not harvested but abandoned. Withered stalks lay where they had fallen, untouched by anyone. The well at the entrance stood with its sweep lowered. The chain on it rusted so thoroughly it was unclear when it had last been used. A few chickens wandered along the fence with the bewildered expression of creatures accustomed to being fed, who have stopped being fed but have not yet understood why. The first person they saw was an old woman on the threshold of the last house. She looked at them from beneath her hand, shielding her eyes from the white sky. Then, without a word, she stepped inside and closed the door behind her. Not with a slam. Carefully, quietly, the way one closes a door when one does not want to draw attention. "Hospitable place," Sifu muttered. Beyond that, it was the same. The people they glimpsed looked past them. Not rudely, not demonstratively, simply averted their eyes, the way one looks past things one has decided not to notice. Children playing by a fence were called inside before the three of them had drawn level with the house. A man carrying a bundle of firewood turned down a side lane, slightly more quickly than the road required. "They are afraid," said Mo, not as a question. "Not of us," answered Chenhu. "Of what will happen if they speak to us." They walked on, toward the smell, which could not be mistaken for anything else. A heavy, stagnant, putrid smell of water that had ceased to be water. A smell in which mud and decay were mixed with something else, darker, older, for which there was no simple name. This smell moved ahead of the swamp the way a shadow moves ahead of a person. The swamp opened up beyond the last houses of the village, where, by all appearances, there had once been a boundary between the settlement and the lake, between the human and the natural. Now there was no boundary. There was only this: a black, oily surface, motionless as cast metal, filmed over with a skin in which the white sky reflected, murkily, as in a dirty mirror. Along the edges, withered reeds, broken and blackened. Here and there, dead tree trunks rose from the water, bare, barkless, without a single leaf, pale as bones. No birds, no frogs, no sound of anything living. The silence over the swamp was different from the silence of the village. It was not watchful, but final. Chenhu stopped at the edge, looked, and then he saw the old man. He knelt several paces from the water, where the ground was still firm but had already begun to yield underfoot. His back was straight, his hands folded before him, his head bowed. He was not praying with the studied concentration that signals a wish to be seen. He was praying the way people pray when there is no one left to show it to. Quietly, inwardly, without words aloud. Chenhu approached and stopped beside him. He did not speak immediately. "Are you praying to the swamp?" he asked at last. The old man did not startle. He raised his head slowly, with the effort that belongs not to the body but to something heavier. His face was cut so deep with lines that each one seemed a separate story, a separate year, a separate loss. His eyes, dark, sunken, looked at Chenhu without fear, without surprise, with the exhausted openness of people who have nothing left to lose that can be lost through another's gaze. "Not to the swamp," he said. His voice was quiet, cracked, like old wood in frost. "To my son." He was silent. Chenhu did not hurry him. "He was killed here. Bandits. They drowned him, and the body cannot be retrieved. It is down there at the bottom, in the mud." The old man looked at the surface of the swamp without hatred, without tears, with the expression that comes after tears have ended and the pain has remained and simply become part of the way the world is arranged. "I come every day. I ask that his spirit does not turn bitter, that he does not harbor resentment against this world, that the Qilin will come one day and take him somewhere peaceful." "The Qilin has not come?" asked Mo. The old man shook his head. "It will not take him. While my son has unfinished business, it will not take him." He looked at the swamp again. "He has one unfinished thing. He wants to be buried, properly. Not to lie in this filth beside those who killed him, but to lie in earth, with the right, with someone coming to speak the words. Until that happens, he will not go, and the others will not go." He paused. "There are many, many like him here." Sifu stood a little behind and looked at the swamp with an expression he wore rarely, without irony, without the readiness to say something sharp. He simply looked. "How many are there?" he asked quietly. The old man did not answer immediately. Then he said, "No one counted. Those who counted are also there." Mo looked down, did not look up immediately. Chenhu crouched beside the old man, not to seem closer, but simply because standing over a seated man in such a conversation was wrong. "Tell me about the bandits," he said. The old man looked at him, the way one looks when weighing whether it is worth it. Then, apparently, decided it was. The clan came several years ago. At first, they simply lived here, said they were traders. Then they began collecting tribute, then killing those who refused. The first bodies were thrown into the lake at night. They thought no one would know. Everyone knew. But there was no one to tell. The lawkeepers were far away, and those who tried to reach them did not arrive. He spoke evenly, without rises or breaks, the way one tells something that has been told so many times the telling itself has become habit. Then they understood that the swamp was convenient. Throw a body in, no body, no case. And they began to treat this place as a kind of helper. They thanked it, in their own way. They gathered here, drank, laughed. This place became something like a shrine to them, only in reverse. And people stopped praying to the god of the lake, said Chenhu. Why pray to a god who does not help? The old man said it without bitterness, as fact. People stopped believing. The water stopped flowing as it should. The rains left. The lake grew smaller, then smaller still. Then it became this. He nodded at the black surface. And when the lake became a swamp, he appeared. A demon, said Mo. The demon of the drowned. The old man spoke the words the way one speaks names that are better not said aloud unnecessarily. Quietly, almost without sound. He came from what had accumulated here, from impunity, from the grief of others, from their pleasure in that grief. Such things do not disappear. They settle like silt on the bottom, and sooner or later, something grows from them. He paused. Now he lives here, and the bandits feed him. They bring new bodies, and he protects them. They need each other, the way we once needed the god of the lake, and he needed us. Chenhu listened and watched the swamp, the black, motionless surface beneath which lay what had once been a lake, what had once given this village water, rain, harvest, what had once been alive. He thought about what the turtle had said. When faith departs, a god weakens. When a god weakens, something else takes his place. And what takes his place feeds on the same thing the god fed on, only with the opposite sign. Not the prayers of the grateful, but the tears of the broken. Not faith, but despair. The mechanism the same, only the direction different. Where are the bandits now? Asked Mo. The old man looked at him, this time with the slight surprise of one watching a person who apparently intends to do something everyone else had long since stopped considering possible. In the temple, he said. In the temple that was the temple of the god of the lake. They took it for lodging. All 50 of them lived there. Sifu, standing behind, swallowed, quietly and distinctly. 50, he repeated. 50, the old man confirmed, and added without cruelty, simply honestly, you will not manage it. Chenhu did not answer. He looked at the swamp for a few moments longer, at the dead trunks, at the black film, at the reeds broken and blackened, and then rose. Slowly, the way people rise who have made a decision and are not in any hurry to announce it. 50 men, Sifu said to Mo very quietly, while Chenhu looked toward the village. Do you understand what that means? Yes, answered Mo. And what do you think about that? I think there are 3 of us, said Mo. Sifu looked at him, then looked at Chenhu's back. "You are both insane," he said. "I simply want that stated aloud." Chenhu turned to the old man. "You come here every day," he said. "Every day you pray, knowing that no one hears." The old man looked up at him, from his knees, in the awkward posture of a person who has long since stopped caring how he appears. "Whether anyone hears or not, that is not the point," he said. "It is all I can do for my son." Chenhu looked at him for a second, two, then nodded, once, briefly, with that particular respect which is not expressed in words precisely because there are no words for it. He turned and walked toward the village. Mo followed immediately, without pause. Sifu stood a moment longer, looked at the swamp, looked at the backs of those walking away, exhaled quietly. 50 men, he said to the swamp. 50. The swamp did not answer. The swamp never answered. It simply stood, black, motionless, full of what no one spoke aloud, and of what had gone nowhere, and of what was waiting. Sifu straightened his clothes and walked after them. They moved away from the swamp far enough for its smell to stop being the only thing one could sense, and stood by a dry tree at the edge of an empty kitchen garden. Chenhu looked at the ground. Mo looked toward the village. Sifu looked at both of them with the expression of a man who already knows the answer, but wants the others to arrive at it themselves. They did not arrive quickly enough. "Right," said Sifu. "I'll say it. Because the two of you have too many muscles, and they press on the brain." Mo turned his head toward him. "The demon feeds on the pain caused by the bandits," Sifu continued, counting on his fingers with the pedantry he always displayed when certain he was right. "The more bodies, the stronger he is. The stronger he is, the longer the swamp stays a swamp. The longer the swamp, the less faith in the god of the lake. All of it spins in a circle, which means, to break the circle, you first have to stop what feeds it. That is, stop the clan, end the flow of bodies." He folded his hands. "That is the entire answer." Which apparently required explanation. Mo looked at him for a moment, then said, "In the end, we still have to fight." Sifu closed his eyes, opened them. "Yes," he said, with the tone of someone conceding what they do not want to concede. "In the end, we still have to fight. The martial artists are right about that. Pure brain power will not be enough." He sighed. "But at least now we know why." "Where are they?" asked Chenhu, not lifting his gaze from the ground. He was asking the old man, who had been standing a little to the side throughout, listening with the expression of someone who had long since stopped hoping, but had not entirely forgotten how it was done. The old man was silent. Then, "In the temple, the one that stands in the center of the village. It was the temple of the god of the lake. People used to come there to pray, to bring offerings." A pause. "Now they live there. They took it over at the very beginning, when they first arrived. The courtyard is enclosed by a high wall. They keep the gates closed." "How many are inside?" asked Mo. "All 50. Sifu swallowed, quietly but distinctly. Mo and Chenhu exchanged a glance, briefly, without words. That particular look that passes between people long accustomed to understanding each other without explanation. "You will not manage it," said the old man. "Not with malice, not with mockery. Simply, the way one states the laws of nature. Water flows downward, fire burns. 3 will not hold against 50. Chenhu looked up. "Why?" The old man looked at him the way one looks at a question that contains its own answer. "There are 50 of them." Sifu swallowed again. Mo stood motionless, and his face was serious, with the seriousness that does not mean fear but means work. Something inside was counting, weighing, searching, and found something. "Old man," said Mo, "I need you to do something." The old man looked at him. "Go to the temple. Enter the courtyard. There should be a bell. Temples like this always have a bell. Strike it. And what will that achieve?" "They will come out," said Mo. "They will come out and kill me." "Not immediately," said Mo. "First they will ask why. You will tell them 3 strangers made you do it, that they want to fight. Tell them the strangers are outside." The old man was silent. He looked at Mo with the expression of someone trying to determine whether they are dealing with a madman or with someone who simply knows something they do not. "What are you planning?" he asked at last. Mo looked at him directly. "To save your village." A pause. "Enough praying. Go and call the bandits." The old man looked at him for a long time, then looked at Chenhu. Chenhu said nothing, simply looked back, calmly, without persuasion, without promises that could not be kept. Then the old man looked at his own hands, at his knees, still damp from the ground by the swamp, and rose. He walked away. They watched him go in silence. Sifu opened his mouth and closed it, understanding this was not the moment. Mo was already moving, around the perimeter, along the wall, toward the spot he had noted on the way here. Chenhu followed. Sifu came after them, quietly, like a man who disagrees with what is happening, but has accepted that no one is asking for his agreement. The bell struck before they had taken their positions. The sound carried over the village, one stroke, then another, uneven, as though the one striking it was unsure how many times was right. Then silence. Then voices, many voices, drowsy, irritated, rising. Mo pressed his back to the wall. On the outside, on the side that faced the lane between the temple and the nearest house, Chenhu stood beside him. Sifu on the other side, slightly further along, with the expression of a man currently engaged in very intensive internal work to maintain composure. From the courtyard came a voice, low, accustomed to being obeyed. "Old man, are you tired of living?" Then the old man's voice, quiet, with that particular intonation of someone asking for mercy from those unaccustomed to giving it. "Have mercy. I was made to do it." 3 strangers. They say they want to fight you. A pause. Then laughter. Several voices, then more. The laughter was lazy, satisfied, the kind that comes from people who have not had reason to take anything seriously for a very long time. And where are these 3 geniuses? Outside. Footsteps. Many feet. Impatient, anticipating. The gates swung open, with a creak, with a clang, and 50 men came out into the street. Chenhu heard their breathing, heard them talking among themselves, heard someone laugh, someone already loosening their hands. He stood motionless against the wall and waited. There was no one outside. The leader, Chenhu had identified him by his voice before he saw him, that particular voice of a man obeyed not out of respect, but out of fear, grabbed the old man by the collar. "What do you think you're playing at?" And then, Mo's voice. From somewhere to the side, from the other end of the wall, clear and deliberately loud, with the calm that is itself a provocation. "Hey, you lot, leave the village, right now, or you will regret it." The laughter grew louder, more delighted. The crowd moved toward the voice, impatiently, with the anticipation of people going to look at something they have already decided is not serious. "Over here," Mo called. "Come over here." They rounded the wall and saw the 3 of them. Mo stood against the wall, back to it, face to the crowd, composed as a man who has come for a conversation. Chenhu beside him, no weapon, hands free, gaze straight. Sifu slightly to the side, with the expression of a man working very hard to look as calm as his two companions and almost succeeding. "Well then," said Mo. Not a shout. He said it evenly, as though continuing a conversation already underway. "Ready to leave the village? Or will you suffer defeat first and leave after?" The leader looked at them, then at his men, then at the three again. His face wore the expression that comes when a man encounters something so inconsistent with his experience that his mind briefly refuses to process it. Then came irritation, genuine, without any trace of amusement. "Are you in your right minds?" he said. "There are 50 of us, 3 of you." "4 against 3, said Mo. Laughter. Again laughter, but different this time, with a question inside it. "How is that?" Mo turned his head slightly, toward the wall at their backs. 50 men cannot attack simultaneously. At any one moment, 8 can reach us at most. A pause. And we are standing against a wall, which means no one can come from behind. 8 divided by 2. That gives 4. 4 against 3 is already a conversation. The leader looked at him for a long time. Something in his expression shifted. Not fear, not yet. Fear was still a long way off. But that first, barely perceptible displacement that comes when one realizes the opponent knows something one has not accounted for. "Clever," he said at last. "But you will tire. Any man tires." "Then let us find out," answered Mo. "Who tires first, and who leaves the village afterward?" The leader looked at him for one more second, then slowly bared his teeth, with the smile that contains nothing except intent. He turned to his men. "Hit them." They began. The first 8 came all at once, exactly 8, as Mo had said, because the wall at their backs was doing its work. There was simply no room for more. Chenhu met the first with an elbow to the bridge of the nose, short, without a wind-up, without wasted movement. That particular strike taught not for elegance, but so that a man stops being in the way. He stopped. The second came from the side. Chenhu stepped aside, let him pass, and allowed the wall to do the rest. A crack. Silence. Mo worked to the right, methodically, without fury, with the cold precision of a master whose every movement is calculated not for effect, but for outcome. Sifu, to the left, and here everything was different. He did not fight methodically or with cold blood. He fought with the desperate inventiveness of a man whose fear had not taken away his ability to think, but sharpened it. Elbow to ribs, knee to thigh, slip, slip again. He did not defeat his opponents so much as persuade them to redirect their attention to someone else. The old man stood against the wall opposite and watched. Beside him, the leader, arms crossed, with the air of a man observing something unpleasant but inevitable. For now, unpleasant for the 3 at the wall. "Look," said the old man, not to the leader, to himself under his breath. "Look how it works." Mo's trick was working. 50 men had become a queue, angry, impatient, getting in each other's way. Those at the back shoved those in front. Those in front could not swing without elbowing their neighbor. The wall prevented anyone from coming around the side. This was not a fight of 50 against 3. It was a fight of 4 or 5 against 3, with constant rotation, constant noise, constant confusion that in the early stages worked against the attackers. The number of bandits was falling. Slowly, 1 by 1, 2 by 2, but falling. The leader uncrossed his arms, stepped forward. "Hit them harder," he shouted, and in his voice was the anger that comes not from danger, but from humiliation. "3 rag pickers and you're standing there gaping? Dogs!" The bandits pressed harder. Chenhu took a blow to the shoulder, heavy, the kind that numbs the arm for a moment. Mo caught a fist to the cheekbone and swayed but held. Sifu ducked under a swing so low he nearly went down, then straightened and found two men in front of him at once, and did the only thing possible in that situation: knocked their heads together. Both sat down. "Not bad," he said under his breath, with genuine surprise in his voice. But time passed, and the body, an ordinary human body, not a god's, not immortal, began to feel that time. Chenhu's breathing grew deeper and faster. Mo's hands grew slightly heavier, slightly slower. Sifu, covering the left flank, began slipping aside more and answering less. That was when the villagers began to gather. They appeared from the lanes, from behind corners, from behind half-open gates, one by one, two by two, silently, with the careful movement of people going somewhere frightening but pulled by something stronger than fear. They stopped at a distance, watched. "Who are they?" one of the women asked the old man, quietly, almost soundlessly, the way one asks when afraid the question itself might bring trouble. The old man straightened, looked at her, then at the three by the wall. "Travelers," he said. His voice was strange, not quiet and not loud, but the voice of a man who has just had something returned to him that he had stopped thinking of as possible. Strangers. They came from nowhere and decided, just like that, to challenge the clan. To save a village they are seeing for the first time. A blow, sharp, open-handed across the cheek, cut him off. The leader stood beside him, and his expression was that of a man whose plan has started going wrong, and whose only way of dealing with that is to make everything else afraid harder. "Shut up." He swept the crowd with his gaze. "Everyone, inside, now." The people flinched, stepped back, reflexively, physically, with that movement which years of fear stitch into muscle before the mind has time to respond. But they did not leave, because the bandits were occupied. Every one of them, occupied at that wall, unable to leave it without losing their position. And this small detail, arising for the first time in a long time, stopped the people mid-step. The leader understood it before they did. He stepped into the crowd, grabbed the nearest person, a young man who had been standing closest, and struck him so that he went down without a sound, without movement, face first into the dust. "Inside," the leader said again. "I won't say it a third time." The crowd froze, looked at the man lying in the dust, looked at the leader, looked at the three by the wall, where it was already visible that something was changing. There were about 20 bandits left, but the three at the wall were already different. Slower, heavier, with that particular awkwardness in movement that appears when the body honestly reports that its reserves are running out. Chenhu was still standing, straight, held upright not by strength but by will, but he was taking more blows through now. Mo was covering his head with his forearms where before he had slipped away. Sifu, quick, nimble Sifu, had simply started blocking, stopped attacking altogether. They were holding on. They were no longer fighting. The old man rose from his knees. He rose slowly, with the heaviness of old people for whom the knees no longer help, and what helps is only the decision to rise. Straightened, looked at the crowd, at the faces in which fear was wrestling with something else, something that did not yet have a name but already existed. "While we stand here," he said, "and try to master our fear." The leader turned toward him. "People who are complete strangers to us are fighting to the death." The leader stepped toward him. "For us," the old man continued without moving, "for a village they are seeing for the first time, for our dead, who are nothing to them." His voice did not tremble. There was no grandeur in it, no breaking point, only the quiet, absolute exhaustion of silence that sometimes turns out to be louder than any cry. "So why are we still afraid?" The leader's hand closed around his throat. The old man went quiet, forced to with a rasp. But he did not fall. He stood there, his hands holding the arm at his throat, and looked at the crowd. And the crowd looked at him, looked at the old man who came to the swamp every day and prayed to his dead son, standing with a stranger's hand on his throat and not dropping his gaze. Looked at the three by the wall who were barely holding on, looked at the young man lying in the dust, and something broke. Not loudly, not with a shout, simply broke. The way ice breaks not from a blow, but because spring has come and it can no longer hold. The stone was small. Who threw it? Unclear. No one admitted it afterward, and no one tried to, because it did not matter. What mattered was that it hit the leader in the head, squarely, without warning, with that accidental accuracy that sometimes belongs to people throwing for the first time in their lives. The leader released the old man, turned around. In the hands of the villagers was everything they had found within reach: stones, spades, hoes, fence posts, wooden mallets. Not weapons, tools. The tools of people who had worked with these hands their whole lives and were now pointing them in a different direction. They ran, not with a battle cry, not with the organized fury of legends. They simply ran, all at once, with their spades and stones, at the leader and at the 20 still standing by the wall. And that was the end. Not because they were more skilled, but because there were more of them, and because the fear that had held them for years had finally found what it needed to push itself outward. Movement. Action. A step forward. Chenhu went down on one knee, for the first time in the entire fight. Mo was holding the wall with one hand. Sifu was sitting directly on the ground and watching what was happening with the expression of a man who has run out of words entirely. Around them, bodies, dust, noise. And the villagers, finishing what the three had started. Then everything went quiet. The villagers pulled them out of a pile of bodies, carefully, with the tenderness one uses for things that might fall apart. They gathered around, looked, silently, without words, with that expression in their eyes that has no exact name but that every person recognizes. This is how people look when something has been returned to them that they had not dared to ask for. Mo was the first to rise. He looked around, methodically as always, then walked to the leader, lying against the wall with a broken face, took him by the collar and pulled him to his feet. Not roughly, but without gentleness. "We're going," he said. The leader looked at him. Mo was already walking, toward the swamp, dragging him along. The villagers understood without words. They took hold of the others, those who could walk, those who had to be carried, and followed. Chenhu and Sifu, beaten, barely moving their legs, walked alongside. The swamp met them with the same smell, the same black stillness. The leader was placed at the edge. The other bandits were lined up beside him, broken, silent, with the particular silence of defeated men who have not yet decided whether to pretend to be more broken than they are. Around them stood the village, everyone who could stand. Children, old people, women. People who for years had lived with their eyes down had now raised them. Voices began to rise, quietly at first, then louder. Not words, just sound, accumulated over years, finding its way out. Patience that always has a bottom had reached it. Mo stood before the leader, looked at him for a long time, without hatred, without triumph, with that calm gravity which is more frightening than hatred precisely because there is nothing personal in it. "Confess," he said. The leader was silent. "Admit everything, in front of them." Mo nodded toward the crowd. Silence. Mo raised his hand, slowly, without fury, simply raised it. The leader flinched, and spoke, heavily, as though each word had to be pulled from somewhere dark and deep. "We threw bodies in. Everyone who crossed us, everyone who tried to leave or report us, threw them here, into the water." "Names," said Mo. The leader went silent. Names! Mo's voice rose, did not break, but rose, the way something heavy rises when it is finally let go. And the leader began to name them. The first name, then the second, third. Somewhere in the crowd, a woman dropped to her knees, soundlessly, as though cut down. Fourth name, fifth. The old man at the edge of the crowd covered his face with his hands and his shoulders began to shake. Sixth, seventh. A boy of about 10 suddenly began to cry, loudly, without holding back, the way children cry, and no one tried to stop him. The names came one after another, and each of them was someone's son, someone's mother, someone's husband, someone's friend, someone's only hope that someone would come back. The village wept, not quietly, aloud, in full voice, with the sobbing that has been held inside a long time. And when it finally comes out, it all comes out at once. Chenhu stood in the middle of that weeping and listened. And something in him, in the part he had learned to keep closed, slowly, against his will, began to respond. He thought of his father, of a name no one would ever call out before a crowd, of a name no one had been there to demand be spoken. The leader kept naming them. And then the earth shook. Not gradually, all at once, sharply, the way it moves not in a slow underground shift, but when something rises from below with intent. People lurched to the sides, someone fell, someone cried out. The swamp heaved. Its entire black, motionless surface came alive, the way water moves when something rises from the bottom. And it was rising. It rose slowly, with that heavy, deliberate slowness that is more frightening than speed, because there is no hurry in it, no need to rush, only the certainty of a creature that knows there is nowhere to go. The swamp parted before it the way a crowd parts before something it fears. First, from the black sludge came 4 limbs, not legs in any familiar sense, but something between roots and paws, thick, knotted, coated in the same oily mud as everything around them, jutting from the sides at wrong angles, like parts of something assembled not for elegance and not for speed, but so that it could crush. Then the body, an enormous, shapeless mass of swamp mud, silt, and that dark, compacted matter that forms on the bottom of still water over years of decay. It moved, slowly heaving, changing shape, losing pieces of itself and immediately restoring them from the swamp beneath, as though the swamp and the creature were the same flesh, as though the boundary between them had never been real. There was no face. There was a place where a face might have been, a dark hollow in which something glowed with a putrid greenish light, unlike any light that exists in the living world. The people stood, not because they had decided to stand, simply because their legs stopped obeying. This happens when one encounters something for which the body has no prepared response. To run, one must know where. To fight, one must understand with what. There was neither here. There was only this creature rising from the swamp, and the smell, multiplied many times over, dense as a wall, the smell of rot and stagnant water, and something older for which there was no name. Who dared? The demon's voice was what sound would be if pulled from the very bottom of a swamp, low, wet, with a gurgling inside it that left no doubt about the nature of the speaker. Who took my food? It turned, slowly, with its entire body because it had no neck, and in each rotation of that enormous mud mass there was the particular fury of hunger, which is unlike anger. It is more primitive, more simple, and for that reason, more frightening. Chenhu stood motionless. Mo beside him, one hand clenched, the other pressed to his ribs where he had taken a blow in the fight. Sifu was silent, and that silence was more eloquent than anything he might have said. The demon found the old man, perhaps because the old man stood closest to the edge of the swamp, perhaps because he was the most still of all, not from fear, but from something else, from that particular calm that belongs to people who have already settled everything inside themselves and have nothing left to lose that it is frightening to lose. An enormous limb, thick, coated in black sludge, leaving a wet trail behind it, reached toward him and closed around his torso. The old man did not cry out, did not struggle. He simply hung in that grip, small, light, like a bundle of autumn branches. The demon lifted him toward the place where a face should have been, and stopped, because the old man was looking at it, looking calmly, with the expression that cannot be performed deliberately, because it only comes when a person has genuinely stopped being afraid. And tears were running down his cheeks, but not the tears one expects from a man in the grip of a demon, not tears of fear, not of pain. Something in them was different, something bright, almost out of place here, in this moment. Why? The demon spoke the word with the genuine bewilderment of a creature that has encountered a response for which it has no explanation. Why are you smiling? The old man was silent for a moment, then spoke, quietly but clearly enough to hear. Because they will leave. He nodded toward the bandit standing at the edge of the swamp, broken, silent. They will leave the village, and perhaps his voice wavered slightly, not from fear. Perhaps now my son will finally go to where he belongs. I am glad. A pause. Even if you kill me, I am glad for him. A tear, one, large, slow, ran down a deep line on his cheek and fell onto the demon's limb. What happened next did not submit to explanation in the categories people use for ordinary things. Where the tear fell, the demon's surface, if it could be called skin, hissed. Not loudly, not with fire, not with smoke, simply hissed, the way water hisses when it falls on something scalding. The demon jerked, sharply, involuntarily, with the movement of a creature unaccustomed to pain because pain is new to it. The grip released. The old man fell. Mo was beside him before he reached the ground, caught him, lowered him, confirmed he was alive. The demon pulled its limb back, looked at the place where the tear had fallen, with the bewilderment that in creatures without faces expresses itself as complete stillness. Mo rose, looked at the demon, looked at the old man, thought, quickly, in the way one thinks in situations where there is no time to think but thinking is necessary. The tear burned it, he said, quietly, not to the demon but to his own people. A tear of joy, of spiritual relief. He looked at the crowd of villagers standing around. With every confession, with every tear, it grows weaker. The demon was already reaching toward someone else, a woman in the front row. But the woman was weeping. It saw this and stopped. Reached toward the next person. That one was weeping too. Another. Another. Tears were everywhere, because the names were still in the air, because they had not left from the moment the leader began to speak them, because grief held inside a long time does not disappear in an instant. The demon moved between the people and could touch no one. "Keep going," Mo shouted at the leader. Not a request, a command, with the sharpness that leaves no room for hesitation. The names, all of them, to the end. The leader looked at the demon, looked at Mo, and named the next one. Somewhere in the crowd, someone sobbed again. Somewhere, people fell to their knees. The tears came the way rain comes once it has started and cannot stop, not because anyone had ordered them to weep, but because the names were real, and each one had something real behind it. The demon screamed. It screamed in that deep, wet voice in which there were no words, only the fury of a creature stripped of the only thing it fed on. It struck the air with its limbs, spraying mud. It grew larger, or seemed larger from fury, from that desperation which in demons expresses itself not in tears but in destruction. And then a drop fell from the sky. One. Simply one raindrop, small, ordinary, the kind that falls at the start of a downpour, when the sky is still deciding whether it means it. It landed on the demon. It howled, not from fury, from pain. Real physical pain, which it had apparently not experienced in a long time. It looked at the place where the drop had fallen, where in its mud flesh something had lightened, brightened by a tiny patch, barely visible. A second drop fell. A third. Then the sky opened. The downpour came as a wall, the way it comes at the end of a long drought, when water returns not gradually but all at once, as though making up for all the time it was absent. People were soaked in seconds. The swamp boiled with thousands of small circles from the drops, and the demon writhed. It crawled toward the swamp, trying to hide inside it, to go under the surface, where it was dark and where the rain could not reach it. It crawled slowly, heavily, losing form under each new wave of water. And as it crawled, it changed. The mud washed away, not all at once, layer by layer, the way what has clung to the outside of something washes from it to reveal what it covered. The people watched. No one ran. No one spoke. Beneath the mud was something else. First, simply a shape, unlike the golem. Then, outlines in which something familiar began to appear. Then, a shell. Old, covered in patterns resembling the script of a language no one remembers. 4 legs, real ones, a turtle's, with webbed toes. A head, rounded, with dark, calm eyes in which there was now something resembling bewilderment and something resembling relief at the same time. The downpour did not stop. The swamp beneath it lightened. The black, oily film broke apart, receded, dissolved in the rain and in what the rain brought with it. Clean water, movement, that return of life which always looks like a miracle, though in truth it is simply water becoming water again. People stood ankle-deep in water that was rising, widening, reclaiming its old place. The swamp was becoming a lake, slowly, unevenly, with the unhurriedness of something returning that had left gradually. The turtle, the small old god of this place, stood in the middle and looked at the sky. The rain stopped, simply stopped, in one moment, as though someone had closed a valve. The last drops fell and dissolved into the water of the lake. Silence settled, a different silence from the one before. A living silence in which one could hear the water lapping, and somewhere in the reeds, no longer dead, already stirring, the first frog began to call. The god of the lake looked at the water, then at the bodies that had begun rising from the depths, one by one, slowly, the way things rise when the force that held them at the bottom is gone. People waded in, knee-deep, waist-deep, and pulled out their own. Wept, holding those they could not hold alive. Wept differently than before. Not from grief alone, but from that complex, hard-to-name feeling when grief and relief walk together, and it is impossible to say where one ends and the other begins. Around Chenhu, Mo and Sifu the souls were gathering. They appeared from the water, from the air, from that place which lies between one world and another. Luminous, nearly transparent, with faces in which something otherworldly and something very human were present at the same time. There were many of them, more than the bodies that had surfaced on the lake. They stood without speaking and looked at the living with the expression of those who have waited a long time and have finally been allowed, not a miracle, but simply the right to leave. The god of the lake spoke. "I have returned," he said, simply, without triumph, with the intonation of a man saying aloud something he himself does not entirely believe yet. Then he looked at the people standing in and beside the water. "Forgive me." His voice was quiet, but in the silence of the lake it carried everywhere. "I should have protected you, from the very beginning. When they came, I should have acted. I did not act. I was weakening, withdrawing into myself. and what happened here happened because I allowed it to happen. A pause. The lake was desecrated, and I became part of that desecration. Not from malice, from weakness. That does not change what occurred. Everything that happened to this village, I am responsible for. The people listened, some still holding those they had just pulled from the water, some standing knee-deep in a lake that minutes ago had been a swamp. On their faces was what appears when people are told a truth they already knew, but did not expect to hear from the one speaking it. I cannot return your dead to you, the god of the lake continued. That is not in my power. It never was. His dark eyes looked straight ahead, did not drop, did not hide. But if you forgive me, I promise you one thing. I will not retreat again. Let me perish rather than become what I was. The people were silent. Then, the woman who had been the first to fall to her knees when the leader was naming names raised her eyes to the god of the lake and slowly nodded. After her, the old man. After him, the others, one by one, the way something nods when a decision has already been made and words for it are no longer needed. The souls around Chenhu, Mo, and Sifu grew brighter. The god of the lake turned to the three of them. He looked at them with an expression in which gratitude was mixed with something more complex, an understanding that neither he nor they had chosen this moment, that something larger had led them here, and that something larger had its own name. He sent you, said the god of the lake. I feel him through the water. The elemental god, the ruling turtle, he sent you here. A pause. I am grateful to you for what you did for this place, for what you did for them. He looked at the souls glowing around them, and for what you did for me. Chenhu was about to speak, but the earth shook again. Differently from the first time. Not from below, but from above. The way it feels when something enormous and very fast approaches from the sky. The sound came ahead of it, low, building, like a roll of thunder that has no end. Chenhu understood before he saw. Qilin, he said, we go, now. Mo was already moving, Sifu behind him, with the speed that comes to people when fear finally has a specific direction to run in. But they managed only a few steps. The Qilin dropped from the sky, did not land, dropped, with a crash that sent rings across the lake, with the shock wave of air that swayed everyone standing nearby. It stood between the three of them and the road, enormous, blindingly white, with the flawless beauty that in certain creatures is not an ornament, but a weapon. What luck, it said. Its voice was light, almost pleased. The lion will be glad. Between it and the three stepped someone small, someone with a shell covered in the patterns of an old language, someone in whose dark eyes there had just been bewilderment, and in which there was now something else, firm, simple, without doubt. No, said the god of the lake. The Qilin looked down at him with the expression one uses for an obstacle not taken seriously precisely because it is too small. You? There was something resembling surprise in its voice, and something resembling boredom. A small god of a small lake. Step aside. I am one of the 7 strongest. I will sweep you away without noticing. The god of the lake did not move. Perhaps, he said, you are stronger than me. I know this. A pause. But I have already retreated once when I should not have, and I will not retreat again, from anyone, not even from you. In his dark eyes was that particular quiet resolve which is more frightening than fury, because it does not depend on the outcome. He had already made his decision. Whatever came after no longer changed it. The Qilin was angry, visible in how something shifted in its flawless whiteness, how something tensed, grew sharper. The god of the lake turned to Chenhu. "Put your hand in the water." Chenhu looked at him for a moment, then stepped to the edge of the lake and lowered his hand, to the elbow, into water that was cold and clean, without any trace of the former swamp darkness. He felt something hard, pulled it out. The crystal lay in his palm, blue, transparent, with that particular inner light that belongs to things taken from deep down. Not heavy, but felt different from objects of its weight, as though it weighed not itself, but everything that water is made of. "This is what you need," said the god of the lake, "the primordial element of water, what the ruling turtle promised you." He looked at Chenhu with an expression in which farewell was already present, but had not yet been spoken. "Now go, quickly. I will hold the qilin." "For how long?" asked Sifu, quietly, almost to himself. "Long enough," said the god of the lake, and in his voice there was neither doubt nor bravado, simply a fact. They ran. Chenhu, Mo, Sifu, along the lakeshore, through the village, past empty kitchen gardens and the well with its lowered sweep, away, toward where the road disappeared over the horizon and where there was nothing but dust and open sky. Behind them, a crash. The sound of two gods colliding, each in their own way unwilling to retreat. The sound of water rising in a column. The sound of something very large and very ancient happening there at the shore of the lake that had just stopped being a swamp. Chenhu ran and held the crystal in his fist, cold, clean, heavy, not with weight but with meaning. It was there, in his hand, and that meant one step of many had been taken. That the gorilla would receive its water, that the metal would cool and take a new shape. Which shape exactly, the gorilla had not said. The sounds behind them did not fade for a long time. Thank you for watching. Now Chenhu knows that every demon was once a god who fell into despair and lost faith in their followers. That is why Lion placed a taboo on killing demons, turning hell into a prison for them instead. But will this stop Chenhu on his path of death? And will he have to answer before Lion himself? Write your theories in the comments.